roasting it in preparation for the banquet. But as soon as they caught sight of the strangers, they all made a move in their direction, waving their hands in welcome and beckoning the newcomers to join them. Nestor's son, Pisistratus, who was the first to reach them, took them both by the hand and gave them places at the banquet on downy fleeces spread over the sandy beach, near his brother Thrasymedes and his father. Then he helped them to the victims' inner parts, filled a gold cup with wine, and proffered it with these words to Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who wears the aegis. This feast that you find us holding is in the Lord Poseidon's honour. Pray to the god, my friend, and when you have made your drink offering and your prayer, as our rites dictate, pass on the cup of mellow wine to your companion here, so that he may do the same. For he too must be a worshipper of the immortal gods, whom no man can neglect. And it is only because he is the younger, in fact a man of my own age, that I hand this golden beaker to you first. And he placed the cup of sweet wine in Athena's hands. The goddess was delighted at the tact and nicety which the young man had shown in giving her the golden beaker first, and at once began an earnest prayer to the Lord Poseidon. Hear me, Poseidon, girdler of earth, and do not begrudge us, your suppliants, the fulfilment of our wishes. First of all, vouchsafe success to Nestor and his sons. Consider next these others, and make a gracious return to all in Pylos for their sumptuous offerings. Grant, lastly, that Telemachus and I may successfully accomplish the task that brings us here in our black ship, and afterwards get safely home. So the goddess prayed, and as each petition left her lips, she herself made its fulfilment sure. Then she passed the fine two-handled beaker to Telemachus, and Odysseus' son repeated her prayers. The outer flesh from the victims was now roasted and drawn off the spits. Portions were carved for all, and they fell too on their splendid feast. When they had satisfied their appetite and thirst, Nestor, the old charioteer of Gerenian fame, made himself heard. Now that our visitors have regaled themselves, it will be no breach of manners to put some questions to them and inquire who they may be. And turning to his guests, who are you, sirs? From what port have you sailed over the highways of the sea? Is yours a trading venture, or are you cruising the main on chance, like roving pirates who risk their lives to ruin other people? Telemachus, inspired by Athena, who was anxious for him to catechize the old king about his father's disappearance, now plucked up the courage to make him a spirited reply. Nestor, son of Neleus, I salute you, whom the Achaeans love to honour. You ask where we hail from. I will tell you. We are from Ithaca, which lies at Neon's foot, and have come on private, not on public business, as you will understand when I tell you that I am searching through the length and breadth of the land for any news that I can pick up of my royal father, the gallant Odysseus, who is said years ago to have fought by your side at the sack of Troy. We can account for all the others who took part in the war. We know where each man fell, and a sorry tale it is, but Zeus has wrapped Odysseus exclaimed Nestor, the Geranian charioteer. What memories the name of Troy brings back, the miseries we fierce Achaeans put up with, the raid after raid across the misty seas in search of plunder at Achilles' beck and call, fight after fight around the very walls of royal Priam's town. And there our best men fell. There warlike Aias lies, there lies Achilles, there Patroclus, wise as the gods in council, there too Antilochus, my own dear son, as good as he was brave, the fastest runner of them all, and was a fighter too. Nor is that the full account of what the Achaean chivalry endorsed at Troy. There is no man on earth who could unfold to you the whole disastrous tale, not though you sat and questioned him for 6 years, by which time your patience will be gone, and you yourself be home. For 9 long years we toiled to bring them down, by every stratagem we could devise. Even when the final victory came, Zeus seemed to grudge it to us, and all the time there was not a man that dared to match his winds against the admirable Odysseus, who in every kind of strategy proved himself supreme. I am speaking of your father, if you really are that great man's son. Indeed, I cannot help looking at you in amazement. You talk exactly as he did, and I should have sworn no youngster could so resemble him in speech. However, in all those years, whether at the General Assembly or in the Council of the Kings, not once did Odysseus and I find ourselves speaking on opposite sides. We seemed to share a single mind. So well did we agree on the policy which, in our good sense and ripe judgment, we laid down for the successful conduct of the Argives' affairs. But not all of the Argives showed as much wisdom or honesty, and so when we had brought Priam's city down in ruins, sailed away and had our fleet scattered by heaven's hand, Zeus planned disaster for them on the homeward run. As a result, many of them came to grief through the fatal anger of the bright-eyed daughter of that mighty sire. She began by making the 2 sons of Atreus quarrel. Acting on the spur of the moment, and with no regard for form, they summoned the whole Achaean army to assemble at sunset, so that the troops rolled up sodden with wine, and then they delivered the harangues for which they had called them together. Menelaus put it to them all that their first concern should be to get to their distant homes across the seas, but this was not at all to Agamemnon's liking. He was for keeping them there and making ceremonial offerings to Athena in the hope of appeasing her terrible wrath, not realizing in his folly how implacable she would prove, for it is not so easy to divert the immortal gods from their purpose. Well, the pair of them stood there, bandying hard words, till their armed audience, themselves divided in opinion, broke up the assembly in indescribable uproar. That night our rest was spoilt by vindictive feelings against our comrades in arms, for Zeus was making ready to strike us the fatal blow. In the morning, half of us ran our ships down into the tranquil seas and stowed in them our spoils, and the captive women with their girdles around their hips. Then, though the rest still held aloof and stayed where they were with Agamemnon, the commander-in-chief, our party embarked and set out. squadrons swung the curved prows of their vessels round and turned back in their tracks. It was the followers of Odysseus, that wise and subtle king, who thus saw fit to renew their allegiance to Agamemnon's son of Atreus. But I, well aware of the gods' sinister designs, fled on with the massed ships that formed my company. Warlike Diomedes did the same, bringing his party with him, and late in our wake red-haired Menelaus followed too. He caught us up in Lesbos, where we were hesitating whether to choose the long passage outside the rugged coast of Chios and by way of Syria, keeping that island on our left, or to sail inside Chios past the windy heights of Mimas. In the dilemma, we prayed for a sign, and heaven made it clear that we should. Cut straight across the open sea to Euboea, to get out of harm's way as quickly as possible. A whistling wind blew up, and our ships made splendid running down the highways of the fish, reaching Gerestus in the night, and many a bull's thigh we laid on Poseidon's altar after spanning that weary stretch of water. It was on the fourth day that the company of Diomedes, the tamer of horses, brought their fine craft to anchor in Argos, but I held on for Pylos, and the breeze never dropped from the moment when, by God's will, it had begun to blow. Consequently, my dear lad, I got back without any news of the men we had left behind, and have no idea who escaped or who was lost. But all the news that has come to me as I sit here at home, you shall have, as is only right, and I'll keep nothing back. In the first place, they tell me that the Myrmidon spearmen reached home in safety unto the great Achilles, his noble son, and that Pylos' son, the brilliant Philodectes, fared equally well. Again, Idomeneus brought all his men to Crete, all that is, who had survived the war. The sea got none from him. As for Agamemnon, I know your home is far from his, yet even you must have heard how he had no sooner got back than he fell a wretched victim to Aegisthus' plot, and a grim reckoning there was for Aegisthus, which shows what a good thing it is when a man dies for a son to survive him, as Orestes survived to pay the murderer out and kill that snake in the grass, Aegisthus, who had killed his noble father. You, my friend, and was a tall and splendid fellow you have grown, must be as brave as Orestes. Then future generations will sing your praises. The wise young Telemachus replied, King Nestor, whom the Achaeans delight to honour, that was revenge indeed. Orestes' fame will travel through Achaean lands and live for generations still to come. Ah, if the gods would only give me strength like his to cope with the insufferable insolence of my mother's suitors, and settle accounts with those ruffians for their blackguardly tricks. But fate has no such happiness in store for me, nor for my father either. I have to grin and bear things as they are. My friend, said Gerenian Nestor, now that your own remarks have put me in mind of it, I admit I have been told that a whole crowd of young gallants are courting your mother, and running riot in your house as uninvited guests. Tell me, do you take this lying down, or have the people of Ithaca been listening to some heaven-fed rumour, has turned their hearts against you. Who knows whether some day Odysseus may not come back, alone perhaps, or with his following intact, and pay these suitors out for all their violence. I only wish that bright-eyed Athena could bring herself to show on your behalf some of the loving care she devoted to your illustrious father in the course of those hard campaigns of ours at Troy. For never in my life have I seen the gods display such open affection as Pallas Athena showed in her championship of Odysseus. Ah, if only she would love and care for you like that, some of those gentlemen would soon have all their thoughts of courtship knocked out of their heads forever. Sire, said the wise Telemachus, I see no hope whatever of your forecast proving true. You have conjured up too marvellous a vision. I cannot bear to think of it, and I for one dare not expect such happiness, even if it proves to be God's will. But Athena rounded on the young man. Telemachus, she exclaimed, what a thing to say! However far a man may have strayed, a friendly God could bring him safely home, and that with ease. And for myself, I would rather live through untold hardships to get home in the end and see that happy day, than come back and die at my own hearth, as Agamemnon died by the treachery of Aegisthus and his wife. But there again, 'tis our common lot to die, and the gods themselves cannot rescue even one they love, when death that stretches all men out lays its dread hand upon him. Mentor, the wise Telemachus replied, let us not discuss these painful matters any more. We can no longer count on my father's return. The gods, who never die, have already set his feet on the dark path that leads to death. But I should like now to bring up another question and put it to Nestor, whose knowledge of men's ways and thoughts is unrivalled, for they tell me he has been king through 3 generations, and when I look at him, I seem to gaze on immortality itself. Here Telemachus turned to his host. Will your majesty enlighten me again? How did imperial Agamemnon meet his end? Where was Menelaus? And by what cunning snare did that false knave Aegisthus contrive to kill a man far braver than himself? Was Menelaus away from Achaean Argos and wandering abroad? Is that why? The coward plucked up the courage to strike. My child, Gerenian Nestor answered, I shall be glad to tell you the whole tale. You can imagine for yourself what would have happened had Agamemnon's brother, red-haired Menelaus, come back from Troy and caught Aegisthus in the house alive. No barrow would have honoured his remains. Flung on the plain outside the city walls, he'd have made meat for the dogs and birds of prey. And there's no woman in Achaea who would have shed a tear for him. He was indeed no petty crime. While we that were beleaguering Troy toiled at heroic tasks, he spent his leisure days right in the heart of Argos, where the horses graze, besieging Agamemnon's wife with his seductive talk. At first, Queen Clytemnestra turned a deaf ear to his dishonourable schemes. She was a sensible woman, and besides, she had a man with her, a minstrel by profession, to whom Agamemnon, when he left for Troy, had given strict orders to watch over his queen. But when that fatal gales with splendid gifts of gold brocade, thank offerings for a success beyond his wildest dreams. Meanwhile, we were sailing in company over the sea from Troy, Menelaus and I, the best of friends. But when we were abreast of the sacred cape of Sunium, where Attica juts out into the sea, Phoebus Apollo let fly his gentle darts at Menelaus's helmsman and struck him dead, with the steering oar of the running ship in his hands. This man, Phrontis, son of Onctor, had been the world's best steersman in a gale, and Menelaus, though anxious to proceed, was detained at Sunium till he could bury his comrade with the proper rites. But when he too had just got away over the wine-dark sea in those great ships of his, and had run as far as the steep bluff of Malea, Zeus, who is always on the watch, took it into his head to give them a rough time, and sent them a howling gale with giant waves as massive and as high as mountains. Then and there he split the fleet into two parts, one of which he drove towards Crete, and the Clydonian settlements on the river Iordanus. Now, where the lands of Gortin end, out in the misty sea, there is a smooth rock that falls abruptly to the water, and the southwesterly gales drive the great rollers against a headland to the left, in towards Vestus, with nothing but this puny reef to keep their violence in check. It was here that one party made their landfall. The crews, by a hair's breadth, escaped destruction. Their ships were splintered on the rocks by the fury of the seas. Meanwhile, Menelaus, with the remaining 5 vessels of his blue-prowed fleet, was driven on by wind and wave to Egypt, and so it came about that he was cruising in those distant parts where people talk a foreign tongue, amassing a fortune in goods and gold, while Aegisthus schemed this wickedness at home. After he had killed Agamemnon, the usurper reigned in golden Mycenae, kept the people under his thumb for 7 years. But the 8th brought him disaster in the shape of Orestes, for that brave youth, returning from Athens, killed Aegisthus, his noble father's murderer, and so the slayer was slain. When Orestes had done the deed, he invited his friends to a funeral banquet for the mother he had loathed and the craven Aegisthus, and on the self-same day he was joined by the veteran Menelaus, bringing in all the treasures that had filled his holds. Be warned yourself, my friend. Don't stray too long from home, nor leave your wealth unguarded with such a set of scoundrels in the place, unless you want them to share it out, to eat up all you have, to make a farce of your expedition. I do urge you, however, to pay Menelaus a visit, for he has only just got back from abroad, and from a region so remote that one might well give up all hope of return once the winds have blown one astray into that wide expanse of sea, which is so vast and perilous that even the birds cannot make their passage in the year. So off you go now, to Menelaus with your ship and crew, or if you prefer the land route, I have a chariot and horses at your disposal, and my sons are at your service too, to escort you to lovely Lacedaemon, where the red-haired Menelaus lives, and see that you approach him in person if you want the truth from his lips. Not that I think you'll get anything else from so intelligent a man as Menelaus. those and sprinkled libations on them. And when they had made their offerings and drunk their fill, Athena and Prince Telemachus both made a move to get back to the shelter of their ship, but Nestor stopped them, protesting loudly. God forbid that you should go to your ship and turn your backs on my house, as though it belonged to some threadbare pauper, and there weren't plenty of blankets and rugs in the places for host and guests to sleep between in comfort. Indeed, I have good bedding for all, and I swear that the son of my friend Odysseus shall not lie down to sleep on his ship's deck so long as I am alive, or sons survive me here, to entertain all visitors that come to my door. Nobly said, dear father, replied the goddess of the flashing eyes, and Telemachus may well accept your invitation, for nothing could be more agreeable. Let him go off with you now and sleep in your palace, while I return to the black ship to reassure the men and tell them each their duties, for I am the only senior in the party. All the rest are young fellows of much the same age as Argyle and Telemachus, and follow him for love. I propose to sleep there by the black ship's hull tonight, and in the morning to set out on a visit to those enterprising people, the Gorgonians, with whom I have an outstanding claim of some importance to settle. But since my friend here has become your guest, I suggest that you should send him on in a chariot with one of your sons, and give him the fastest and strongest horses in your stable. As she finished, bright-eyed Athena took the form of a sea eagle and flew off. They were all confounded at the sight. The old king marvelled as he took it in, and seizing Telemachus' hand, saluted him. My friend, he cried, no fear that you will ever be a dastard or a knave. When young, as you are, you already have your guardian gods. For of all that live on Olympus, this was no other than the daughter of Zeus, the august lady of Triton, who singled out your noble father too for honour among the Argives. My queen, be gracious to your servant, and vouchsafe good repute to me and to my sons, to my faithful consort. In return you shall have a yearling heifer, broad in the brow, whom no one yet has broken in, and led beneath the yoke. She shall be sacrificed to you with gold foil on her horns. His prayer reached the ears of Pallas Athena, and now the Gerenian charioteer Nestor led the way towards his stately home, followed by his sons and his daughters' husbands. When they came to the royal palace, they took their places on the settles and chairs, and the old man prepared a bowl of mellow wine for his guests, from a jar that had stood for 10 years before. The maid undid the cap and broached it. When the old king had mixed a bowl of this vintage, he poured a little out, with earnest prayers to Athena, daughter of Zeus, who wears the aegis. They made their libations and quenched their thirst, after which the rest went off to their several quarters for the night. But the Gerenian horseman Nestor arranged for King Odysseus' son Telemachus to sleep at the palace itself, on a wooden bedstead in the echoing portico, with Pisistratus beside him, for that young spearman and captain was the only unmarried son left to him in the house. The king himself retired to rest in his room at the back of the high building, where the queen his wife made bed and bedding ready for him. When tender dawn had brushed the sky with her rose-tinted hands, Gerenian Nestor got up from his bed, went out and seated himself on a smooth bench of white marble, which stood gleaming with polish in sceptre in hand, a warden of the Achaean race. His sons all came from their rooms and gathered around him: Echephron and Stratius, Perseus and Aretus, and the noble Thrasymedes. The young lord Pisistratus came last, and made the sixth. Prince Telemachus was ushered to a seat at their side, and Nestor, the Tyrrhenian charioteer, now made his wishes known. Bestir yourselves, my dear sons, and help me to pay my devotions to Athena, who of all gods has the first claim upon them, since it was she who made herself manifest to me at our sumptuous banquet. Go, one of you, to the meadows for a heifer, and get her here without delay, telling the man in charge of the herd to drive her up, and one go down to Prince Telemachus's ship and bring all his crew along but two, while another summons the goldsmith Lerses to the house to gild the heifer's horns. The rest of you stay with me here, and tell the servants indoors to prepare a feast in the palace, and to fetch seats and wood to go round the altar, and a supply of fresh water. They all hurried off to carry out his orders. The heifer was brought in from the meadows. Prince Telemachus's crew came up from his good ship, and the smith arrived, equipped with the tools of his trade, the anvil, the hammer, and the sturdy tongs he used for working gold. Athena too attended to accept the sacrifice. Then Nestor, the old charioteer, gave out the gold, which the smith worked into foil and laid around the heifer's horns by way of embellishment to please the goddess's eye. Next, Stratius and Echephron led the heifer forward by the horns, and Aretus came out from the storeroom, carrying in his right hand a flowered bowl of lustered water from their use, and in the other a basket with the barley corns, while the stalwart Thrasymedes, gripping a sharp axe, stood by to cut the victim down, and Perseus held the dish to catch its blood. The old charioteer Nestor now started the ritual with the lustral water and the scattered grain, and offered up his earnest prayers to Athena as he began the sacrifice by throwing a lock from the victim's head on the fire. When they had made their petitions and sprinkled the barley corns, Nestor's son Thrasymedes stepped boldly up and struck. The axe cut through the tendons of the heifer's neck, and she collapsed. At this, the women raised their cry. Nestor's daughters and his sons' wives, and his loyal consort Eurydice, Clymennes's eldest daughter. But the men lifted the heifer's head from the trodden earth and held it up, while the captain Pisistratus cut its throat. When the dark blood had gushed out and life had left the heifer's bones, they swiftly dismembered the carcass, cut slices off the thighs in ceremonial fashion, wrapped them in folds of fat, and laid raw meat above them. These pieces the venerable king burnt on the fire, while he sprinkled red wine over the flames, and the young men gathered round with 5-pronged forks in their hands. When the thighs were burnt up, and they had tasted the inner parts, they carved the rest into small pieces, pierced them with skewers, horses and harness them to a chariot so that he can be getting on his way. They obeyed him promptly and soon had a pair of fast horses harnessed to a car in which the housekeeper packed bread and wine together with dainties of the kind that royal princes eat. Telemachus took his place in the handsome chariot, and Nestor's son, the captain, Pisistratus, got in beside him, took the reins in his hands, and flicked the horses with a whip to start them. The willing pair flew off towards the plains, putting the high citadel of Pylos behind them, and all day long they swayed the yoke up and down on their necks. By sundown, when the roads grew dark, they had reached Pherae, where they drove up to the house of Diocles, son of Ortilochus, whose father was Alpheus. There they put up for the night, and received the gifts that hospitality dictates. But tender dawn had hardly touched the east with red, when they were harnessing their horses once again, and mounting the gaily coloured chariot. Out past the sounding portico, and through the gates they drove, a flick of the whip to make the horses go, and the pair flew on with a will. In due